Let's dive right into this explainer, and today we're doing something a little bit different. We are unpacking a deeply personal exploration of family history and Irish heritage. It all starts with this genealogical mystery I uncovered in a 1900 census from Charlestown, Massachusetts. I found a 56-year-old house painter named John Downey, and he was living with his cousin, who happens to be my great-great-grandmother, Hannah O'Sullivan. And that got me thinking, who exactly was this man, and how in the world did he end up in this tight-knit Irish neighborhood?
Now, what's really wild about this discovery is how a single, boring, seemingly mundane line on a census record can just blow the doors open to an absolute epic tale of survival. I mean, this story takes us from the desperation of the Irish famine all the way across the ocean and straight into the brutal, sun-baked deserts of the American Southwest. It's a pretty powerful reminder that incredible, world-spanning histories are literally hiding right in our own family trees.
So first things first, we had to figure out exactly how John fit into this Boston family. It's like a giant puzzle. We really had to unravel whether his first cousin was the widow Hannah Sr., who was born in 1832, or her daughter Hannah Jr., born in 1861. See, because John was born in 1844 to Catherine Sullivan, both of these Hannahs, thanks to the super complex interwoven Sullivan and Dealey family lines, could potentially be his first cousin. It's your classic tangled genealogical web.
Okay, moving into Section 1, Ireland to the frontier, the long journey west.
So long before he was ever a house painter in Boston, John was born in Bantry, County Cork. This was back in March 1844. He actually grew up during the sheer, unimaginable devastation of the Great Famine before eventually escaping to America. And what we have right here is his actual, very fragile baptismal record from County Cork, confirming his parents were John Downey and Catherine Sullivan. Documents exactly like this are absolutely crucial. They're the foundational building blocks of family history, pinning a sprawling American life down to a very specific, tiny parish back in Ireland.
Fast forward a bit to November 16, 1869, and John's path takes a huge, dramatic turn. Take a look at this Army register. It shows that this 5'7" laborer with gray eyes walked right into a New York City recruitment office and enlisted for a 5-year term. He joined Company F of the 3rd U.S. Cavalry. He was 25 years old at the time, completely stepping into the unknown.
Talk about a culture shock. John was immediately ripped from the crowded industrial Northeast and dropped straight into the unforgiving, arid environment of the Arizona Territory. His new job at Camp Grant? To secure the expanding American West during the rapidly escalating Apache campaigns.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Toll of the West, a broken heart in Arizona.
Now, cavalry service in the 1870s was famously brutal. It completely destroyed men's bodies. You had intense desert heat, freezing cold mountain nights, horrible rations, and relentless tracking across just incredibly rugged terrain. After only 16 intense months out there on the frontier, John's health just collapsed. He got an official medical discharge. The diagnosis was incredibly severe. Progressive dilatation, which basically means a severely enlarged heart, along with chronic bronchitis. The Army surgeon actually noted this was caused by sheer, chronic physical overexertion out in the field. The environment literally broke him.
And the timeline of his recovery? Just brutal. Even though he was officially a discharged civilian by March of 1871, John was way too sick to survive the harsh journey back east. So he was subjected to a grueling, months-long confinement in these rough frontier military hospitals. He bounced from Camp Pinhall down to Camp Lowell near Tucson, essentially stranded out in the desert, just desperately trying to stabilize his heart and lungs enough to travel.
You can really see the historical grit of his story in this primary document from Camp Pinhall. If you look closely right there at the entry, it explicitly lists John as sick in hospital. It's a really sobering reminder of a young immigrant battling for his life, thousands of miles away from anyone he knew.
Let's move to Section 3, Return to the Plains, the Great Sioux War.
Somehow, miraculously, John actually survived the journey back to Massachusetts to recuperate. But the economic pull of the time, or maybe just a deep loyalty to his regiment, drew him right back into the cavalry. In 1873, he re-enlisted in his old unit, Company F, 3rd Cavalry, as you can see here on his Indian Wars Pension Index card. But the regiment wasn't in the southwestern deserts anymore. They had shifted their headquarters all the way up to the Department of the Platte, which covered Wyoming, Nebraska, and the Dakota Territory.
And this second enlistment? It sent him straight into the crucible of the Great Sioux War against the Lakota and Cheyenne from 1876 to 1877, right out on the northern plains.
He marched in some of the most famous chaotic campaigns in American military history, literally pushing an already damaged heart and damaged lungs to their absolute breaking point.
Okay, Section 4, a veteran in Charlestown. Life at 180 Chelsea Street. Following his final discharge in the late 1870s, John finally stepped away from the military for good. He found a safe haven back in the tight-knit Irish enclave of Charlestown, Massachusetts. He embedded himself deep within his extended family networks, eventually moving right into 180 Chelsea Street with cousin Hannah.
Just look at this contrast for a second. It is wild. He transitions from the vast, dusty, totally isolated stretches of Arizona's Camp Grant directly to this dense, industrial, brick-paved neighborhood in Charlestown, sitting right across the street from the bustling Navy Yard.
But unfortunately, civilian life didn't really offer him any physical relief. He started working as a house painter in the early 20th century, which meant heavy, daily exposure to toxic lead fumes and paint. This kind of harsh labor severely aggravated all those respiratory and cardiovascular issues, the bronchitis, the enlarged heart, that he originally sustained out west.
And this is the part where the family history just becomes incredibly tangible for me. My grandfather, Jeremiah Sullivan, actually lived in that exact same house in Charlestown with John, right up until Jeremiah was about 5 years old. It's just fascinating to sit back and imagine a 5-year-old boy absorbing an old cavalryman's wild tales of the Apache campaigns. You have to wonder, did those stories echo in his mind when Jeremiah himself was sent down to Texas with the National Guard years later, 1916?
Which brings us to our final chapter, Section 5, the final journey home, Togus and rest.
By 1917, John was 73 years old, and his battered body just couldn't hold out any longer. He couldn't be properly cared for at home anymore, so he was admitted to the Togus National Home up in Maine. This was actually the nation's very first asylum for volunteer soldiers. And if you look at his admission register, he explicitly lists Hannah O'Sullivan of 180 Chelsea Street as his next of kin, cementing that vital, lifelong family bond.
He wound up spending almost 3 years in institutional care at this sprawling, really grand facility. The doctors at Togus noted his progressively worsening arteriosclerosis, which sadly was a direct, long-term consequence of the cardiovascular strain that an Army doctor diagnosed in an Arizona desert tent nearly 50 years prior.
John passed away on October 30th, 1920, and because his body was shipped across state lines, his Massachusetts death certificate had to be filed by the younger Hannah O'Sullivan, who was by then the last surviving Hannah. It officially marks the end of this incredible transatlantic, transcontinental journey, citing arteriosclerosis as the cause of death.
In true accordance with his family's deep, enduring connection, they didn't leave him in Maine. His body was returned to Charlestown. As this Boston Evening Globe notice highlights, they held a requiem mass for him at St. Catherine's Church, and this old soldier finally found his rest at Holy Cross Cemetery in Malden.
So as we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. How does the memory of one soldier's grueling journey shape the generations that follow? We really have to wonder how John Downey's epic sacrifices lived on in the mind of young Jeremiah Sullivan. It leaves us to reflect on the quiet yet deeply enduring power of family history, and how the echoes of a distant cavalry charge can still resonate in a Charlestown living room decades later. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today. I'll see you next time.